Welcome to the Restful Night Library. I'm Mira Heart. Settle in, breathe slowly, and let tonight's story carry you gently into rest. The Hearth Room. Firewood settled inward upon itself with a low crackling sound, soft beneath the thick stone arch of the hearth, where heat had gathered all evening and now rested deep within the room. The old lodge sat high among dark pine hills beyond the snow line, though little of the outside world could still be seen through the frost-softened windows. Snow drifted quietly past the glass in slow, pale folds, and each time the wind moved through the trees beyond the walls, the sound arrived softened by distance and weather, as though the night itself had grown thick and warm around the house. The last blue light of evening had already faded from the ridges by the time the lamps were lit, indoors, and now the whole room glowed low beneath amber shades and firelight. Nothing moved except the fire. Near the wide hearthstones stood a deep chair, upholstered in worn brown wool, its heavy blanket folded once across the arm where warmth from the fire had slowly gathered through the evening hours. The scent of cedar smoke drifted upward through the room and mixed with the faint, dry smell of old books resting along the shelves beside the chimney wall. Outside, snow continued in its quiet, downward way, touching roof beams and pine branches without hurry, while indoors the fire breathed softly through the grate in long, glowing folds of red and gold. The room had settled fully into night by now. Stillness rested there. Along the mantel, small shadows shifted gently whenever the firewood folded inward upon the coals. A brass candle holder near the clock caught the glow for a moment before dimming once more, and the glass face of the clock reflected the moving firelight in soft, uneven rings. Its ticking remained low beneath the crackle of cedar logs, almost too soft to separate from the larger hush filling the room. Heat lay close around the hearthstones and drifted outward slowly across the woven rug, where the wool threads had warmed beneath the fire through long hours of evening. Beyond the windows, snow moved silently through the dark. A kettle rested near the side of the grate, where the iron had grown warm enough to hold a faint, low hum inside the metal. From time to time, a thread of steam rose upward and disappeared into the dim air above the fire, carrying with it the scent of black tea and cedar smoke. The windows nearest the hearth had begun to gather a thin veil of mist along the corners, softening the view of the pine trees outside until they appeared only as dark, still shapes beneath the snow. The room seemed smaller now, in the best way, held close by weather and warmth together. The fire continued its slow, steady sound. Near the shelves by the chimney sat a stack of folded quilts, thick with old cotton batting and worn smooth along the seams from years of winter evenings beside the same hearth. Their weight seemed to hold warmth inside them even before they were touched, and the top quilt carried the faint scent of soap and cedar from the chest upstairs where it had rested through summer months. One edge of the fabric had slipped loose against the floorboards, where firelight moved softly across its stitched pattern in dim amber waves. Nothing in the room felt new. Each thing had settled long ago into its place beside the fire. The windows gave small, quiet sounds now and then, as cold from the snow pressed lightly against the warm, old glass. Frost had begun to gather in pale, curling shapes along the lower edges, while the fire continued to breathe warmth steadily through the room. Somewhere above, along the rafters hidden in shadow, old timber shifted once with a slow, wooden sigh before growing still again, Outside, the snow deepened around the lodge and softened every sound among the trees. Indoors, the crackle of cedar remained low and even. By the time the night had fully settled over the hills, the fire had burned inward into deeper colors, where the brightest flames no longer reached high, above the logs, but folded quietly through the coals beneath. Warmth remained close around the hearthstones and along the chair beside them, while the farther corners of the room drifted into soft shadow beneath the low amber lamps. The shelves, quilts, clock, and windows all seemed gentler now, their edges blurred by firelight and the deep quiet of late evening. And the snow was still falling, still and soft, soft and deep against the roof and pines. The kettle near the grate no longer hummed, though heat lingered within the iron and kept the metal warm beneath the dim glow of the fire. A faint thread of cedar smoke moved lazily upward through the room before disappearing among the rafters, where darkness rested thick and still above the lamplight. The woven rug before the hearth had gathered deep warmth through the long evening hours, and the floorboards beneath it held that warmth close, like stored sunlight from another season. Beyond the frosted windows, the pine trees had nearly vanished into snow darkness, entirely. Only the fire remained bright enough to shape the room. The chair beside the hearth seemed heavier now, settled low upon the rug beneath the folded blanket resting over its arm. Firelight moved slowly across the wool fabric in soft, dim waves, gold becoming red, then fading gently back into shadow as the logs shifted inward upon themselves. The clock upon the mantel continued its quiet ticking beneath the crackle of cedar and the hush of snow against the roof. Each sound remained low and unhurried, held inside the warmth of the room. Nothing asked for attention here. Along the windows, frost had spread farther across the glass until the outside world appeared softened into pale gray shapes beneath the snow. The pines beyond the lodge no longer stood apart from one another, but blended into one dark, still line beneath the weather. Inside, the fire had reached its deepest stage, where glowing coals rested beneath ash in long folds of red-orange heat, and the room carried that warmth close through every floorboard and quilt and book-lined wall. The night continued, deep and slow. The fire settled lower within the grate, each small sound softer than before, until even the crackling of cedar seemed to blur gently into the larger hush of the room. Warmth rose slowly along the stone chimney and spread through the rafters overhead, where darkness held quietly above the dim lamps and fading glow below. The chair remained near the hearth. The quilts remained folded beside the shelves. Snow continued beyond the windows in its patient downward drift. Nothing changed quickly. The room had grown softer in every corner now. Firelight no longer reached far across the shelves or floorboards, but rested close around the hearthstones and the rug beside them, where the deepest warmth still gathered. The clock ticked on beneath the hush of cedar coals. The windows held their pale frost along the edges. Beyond them, snow moved through the dark pine hills, without sound, quiet and warm. A low, red glow remained beneath the ash, folding inward through the coals with slow, steady heat that seemed older now than flame itself. The scent of cedar smoke rested lightly through the room and along the quilts beside the shelves, where warmth had settled deep into the cloth through long hours near the hearth. Outside, snow continued its soft, downward motion beyond the frosted panes, though the world beyond the lodge had faded almost entirely into dark and white and stillness. The room breathed quietly around the fire. The hearthstones held their warmth beneath the low, red coals. Snow drifted softly against the old glass and pine-dark hills. The chair beside the fire remained still beneath its folded wool blanket. Nothing had ended. The night simply rested there among cedar smoke and quiet firelight. The fire glowed low within the stone grate. Frost curled softly along the window edges. Snow moved through the dark trees beyond the lodge roof, slow and deep and soundless. Warm coals and snow held the room through the deep night. The river bend. The river moved steadily through the dark pines beside the campsite, its low flowing sound deep enough to soften every smaller noise within the trees. Near the water's edge, a canvas tent rested beneath tall cedar branches whose needles stirred gently in the cool night air, while a small fire glowed low within a ring of smooth gray stones nearby. Smoke drifted upward in pale ribbons and carried the scent of cedar wood and warm earth through the clearing. Beyond the firelight, the forest had already faded into deep shadow beneath the late summer sky. The evening had settled quietly around the riverbank. A wool blanket lay folded across a weathered camp chair, facing the fire. Its thick woven threads warmed slowly through long hours beside the glowing coals. Nearby, a lantern hung from a low cedar branch and cast soft amber light across the tent canvas, where shadows from moving leaves shifted gently against the pale fabric. The river beyond the clearing reflected faint traces of moonlight between dark stones and slow-moving water. Night had deepened now, and the whole campsite seemed held close between the warmth of the fire and the steady hush of the river. Nothing moved quickly here. Small curls of smoke rose lazily from the cedar logs, resting low within the fire ring, where orange coals glowed beneath soft gray ash. Every so often, a single ember shifted quietly inward, releasing a brief wash of warmth across the nearby grass before settling once more into stillness. The scent of smoke mixed softly with damp river stones and pine needles warmed earlier by the day's fading heat. Beyond the edge of the clearing, the river continued in its slow, even rhythm through the trees. Near the lantern rested a metal kettle, darkened slightly by old campfires, its rounded surface holding the amber glow in soft, dim reflections. Beside it sat a tin mug, still carrying traces of peppermint tea within the cool night air. A faint thread of steam no longer rose from the cup, now that evening had grown deeper, though warmth lingered quietly within the metal itself. The camp chair beside the fire remained wrapped in the folded wool blanket. The clearing stayed still beneath the pines. One smooth river stone near the fire ring had gathered deep warmth from the coals beside it, and now the heat rested quietly within the pale gray surface against the cool grass around it. Tiny sparks drifted upward now and then through the smoke before fading into the dark branches overhead, where cedar needles moved softly beneath the night breeze. The lantern glow along the tent canvas had begun to dim slightly as the flame settled lower behind the glass. Beyond the clearing, water crossed hidden stones in the dark, quiet and low. The tent itself held the faint scent of canvas warmed through earlier sunlight, and now cooled gently beneath the night air. Along one side, the flap had been rolled back slightly to allow the river breeze to move softly through the sheltered space inside. A sleeping bag rested within the tent upon thick blankets spread carefully over pine needles and packed earth, their surfaces carrying the deep warmth stored from the day. Outside, the fire continued its slow crackling beneath drifting smoke and cedar scent. Along the edge of the river bank, reeds bent gently whenever cooler air drifted upward from the moving water below. Moonlight touched the shallow current only in small, broken pieces between the stones, silver here and there before disappearing again into darkness beneath overhanging branches. The sound of the river no longer seemed separate from the forest now. Water, leaves, smoke, and wind had blended softly into one low, quiet rhythm surrounding the campsite. The night had grown very still. Warmth rested close around the fire ring and spread slowly outward through the clearing, touching the nearby chair, folded blanket, and grass darkened by evening dew. The cedar logs had burned inward now until flame no longer rose high above the stones, but folded quietly through deep orange coals beneath the ash. Smoke drifted lazily upward through the pine branches before disappearing into the dark sky overhead. The lantern beside the tent cast only enough light to soften the canvas and nearby ground. The river moved on beyond the clearing with the same patient sound it had carried all evening, low water crossing smooth stones beneath dark cedar shadows. Firelight reflected faintly along the kettle near the grass, then dimmed once more as the coal settled deeper within the ring of pale stones. The wool blanket over the chair arm had begun slipping slowly downward under its own weight toward the ground, and the night was quiet, quiet and warm, warm and deep beside the river. A small breeze moved once through the clearing and brushed softly against the tent canvas before fading back into stillness among the trees. The lantern flame behind the glass shifted gently for a moment, sending dim amber light across the nearby grass and smoke, before settling once more into a low, steady glow. Along the riverbank, reeds bent slightly toward the water and then grew still again. Nothing in the forest seemed awake, except the river itself. The fire had reached its oldest stage now, where the cedar wood no longer cracked sharply, but glowed low beneath folds of soft ash and deep orange heat. Warm stones circled the coals quietly, while smoke drifted upward in thin, pale lines through the dark branches above. The tent canvas near the lantern held a faint gold glow against the larger darkness surrounding the clearing. Beyond it all, the river moved slowly through the night. The wool blanket upon the chair had gathered the warmth of smoke and cedar fire through long evening hours beside the coals. Nearby, the kettle rested dark and still beside the grass, while the lantern continued glowing softly beneath the low cedar branch overhead. The whole campsite seemed smaller now, in the best way, enclosed gently by river sound and pine shadows. The night continued, low and steady. The river flowed quietly beyond the fire ring, deep water moving through dark stones beneath the cedar trees. Coal settled inward beneath pale ash, while warmth lingered softly along the nearby grass and riverbank stones. Smoke drifted lazily upward through the branches before fading into the dark. Nothing changed quickly here. The lantern near the tent glowed lower now, its amber light softer against the pale canvas and folded blanket resting upon the chair. Warmth still gathered near the stones circling the fire, while cooler air moved gently beside the river reeds beyond the clearing. The kettle remained beside the grass, untouched beneath drifting smoke and moonlight. Quiet filled the woods. The river carried its low, steady sound through the pines and across the dark clearing where the coals continued glowing beneath ash and cedar wood. Tent canvas moved softly once beneath the breeze, before growing still again beside the lantern glow. Smoke lingered faintly through the warm night air, slow and deep. The fire ring held its warmth close beside the river stones and grass. The lantern glowed softly near the canvas tent beneath the cedar branches. Water moved quietly through the dark trees beyond the clearing. The campsite rested gently within the night. Warm coals glowed low beside the river and dark pine woods. The wool blanket. Rain rested softly against the apartment windows, while evening light faded slowly between the tall buildings beyond the glass. Near the center of the room, a wide bed stood beneath a brass reading lamp whose amber shade cast warm light across folded quilts and thick cream-colored blankets gathered near the pillows. One heavy wool blanket had already been drawn loosely across the bedspread, its woven texture catching the glow from the lamp in soft, uneven folds. Outside, rain drifted steadily through the darkening city streets below. Indoors, warmth lingered quietly within cotton sheets, wool fabric, and the hush of late evening. Nothing moved quickly here. Beside the bed stood a low bookshelf, topped with stacked hardcovers and a steaming ceramic mug resting upon a small quart coaster. The scent of chamomile tea drifted upward through the room and mixed gently with rain-cooled air slipping faintly through the narrow opening beside the window frame. Curtains hung half-closed against the glass, their pale linen edges stirring only slightly whenever the night breeze moved inward from outside. The last traces of daylight had nearly disappeared now beyond the rain-dark windows, leaving the room held softly between amber lamp glow and quiet weather. The evening settled deeper. A small crease near the edge of the wool blanket had formed where the fabric folded over itself, creating a deeper shadow within the thick, woven threads beneath the lamp. Tiny fibers along the blanket surface caught the light differently each time the curtain shifted beside the window, warm cream becoming pale gold before softening again into shadow. The blanket carried the faint scent of cedar drawers and clean wool, warmed through by hours indoors. Outside, rain crossed the windows in slow silver lines. Near the mug upon the bookshelf, a thin curl of steam continued rising steadily through the dim room, even though the tea itself had already begun cooling within the ceramic cup. The warmth inside the mug still rested deep enough to soften the scent of chamomile and honey drifting gently through the nearby air. Beside it, an open book lay face down upon folded blankets, its pages slightly curved where the lamp heat touched the paper edges. The room remained still beneath rainfall and amber light. Along the far wall, an old radiator gave off one soft ticking sound now and then as warmth moved slowly through the iron pipes inside. Heat gathered quietly near the floorboards and spread upward through the room, settling within blankets, curtains, and the thick woven rug beside the bed. The wool blanket across the bed had already absorbed some of that warmth, and now rested heavily against the cotton quilt beneath it. Rain moved steadily beyond the windows, quiet and low. The brass reading lamp beside the bed cast soft light across the nearest pillowcases, while the farther corners of the room drifted gradually into shadow. Reflections from passing rainwater moved faintly across the window glass, blurring the distant city lights into pale shapes that no longer seemed sharp or separate from the dark. The folded edge of the wool blanket rose slightly where thicker layers gathered near the foot of the bed. The whole room had begun to feel smaller, in the best way, enclosed gently within warmth and rain. One corner of the blanket had slipped partly onto the rug beside the bed, its weight pulling the heavy wool downward in slow folds against the woven fibers below. Nearby, the curtains rested softly against the rain-dark glass, while cool air moved quietly through the narrow opening near the window frame. The scent of chamomile tea and warm wool lingered low within the room now, woven gently into cotton sheets and lamp-heated air. Nothing remained hurried here. Warmth gathered deeply beneath the wool blanket, where layers of fabric rested against one another across the bedspread. The radiator near the wall continued its soft, occasional ticking beneath the steady hush of rain against the windows, while the lamp beside the pillows glowed lower and softer as evening deepened into night. The mug upon the bookshelf still held traces of warmth within the ceramic walls. Outside, the city had faded into rain-dark shapes and dim, reflected light. The blanket itself had begun settling more heavily across the bed now, folds sinking slowly into the mattress beneath their own weight, while the woven fibers stored the room's warmth deep within the cloth. Shadows along the bed frame softened beneath the amber lamp glow and drifted gently outward toward the quiet corners of the room. Rainwater crossed the windows in long silver threads that bent distant lights into wavering shapes. And the room was warm, warm and still and low beneath rain and wool. A faint draft moved once beside the curtains and brushed softly across the outer edge of the blanket before fading again into the larger warmth gathered within the room. The pages of the open book upon the bed gave one small shift beneath the moving air and then rested once more against the quilt. The radiator continued its slow, quiet rhythm beneath the window, while rain drifted steadily through the dark streets below. Nothing in the room seemed awake, except the soft glow of the lamp. The wool blanket had reached that deep evening warmth, carried only by thick fabric left resting for hours within quiet rooms. Heat lingered inside the folds and along the woven threads, nearest the pillows, where the blanket gathered highest across the bed. Nearby, the ceramic mug upon the bookshelf no longer released steam, though the scent of chamomile remained faintly within the air above it. The night continued, quiet and deep, beside the rain-dark windows. The lamp glow had softened further now, turning the blanket into pale folds of cream and shadow against the dim room. Rain crossed the window steadily, while warmth rested low across the mattress, rug, and cotton sheets beneath the wool. The curtains near the glass no longer moved. Even the city beyond had grown quiet beneath the weather. The heavy blanket rested still across the bed, its folds gathered softly near the pillows and along the edge where the fabric touched the woven rug below. Warmth remained deep within the wool, while rain drifted through the dark outside the windows. The lamp beside the bed glowed low against the brass frame and pale linen curtains, slow and warm. The radiator near the wall had grown quiet now, though heat still lingered gently through the room and beneath the blanket folds spread across the bed. The mug upon the bookshelf rested beside the closed book beneath the dim amber light, while rain moved softly against the darkened glass beyond the curtains. Nothing changed quickly here. The room simply settled deeper into stillness. Warm wool rested heavily across the bed beneath the low brass lamp glow. Rain crossed the windows beside pale curtains and folded quilts, The mug and closed book remained quiet upon the shelf near the wall. The room held its warmth gently through the deep night. The blanket lay soft beside warm light and rain-dark glass. The Floating Cove. Warm water moved slowly against the smooth stones of the hidden cove, while late afternoon sun rested across the surface in long, soft bands of gold. Near the edge of the inlet, pale wooden docks stretched quietly above the water, beside a cluster of sun-warmed rocks, where folded towels and woven baskets sat untouched beneath the fading light. The sea beyond the narrow cove entrance had already softened into deeper blue beneath the lowering sun, though inside the sheltered water, the surface remained calm enough to hold shimmering reflections of sky and stone together. Gentle waves brushed steadily against the dock posts. The whole cove seemed suspended within warmth and light. Farther along the shoreline, a hammock had been tied loosely between two leaning palms, whose long fronds shifted lazily whenever the sea breeze drifted through the cove. Beneath them, the air carried the faint scent of salt water and warm driftwood drying beneath the sun. The wooden planks of the dock had absorbed hours of heat through the afternoon, and now released it slowly into the cooling evening air. Beyond the cove entrance, gulls moved silently against the pale sky, while water continued its slow, easy motion below. Nothing asked to be hurried here. A small ring of ripples widened gently across the water where sunlight touched the cove most brightly, each soft circle drifting outward until it disappeared against the larger stillness surrounding it. Beneath the clear surface, pale sand shifted slightly with the movement of the tide, while strands of seagrass bent lazily beneath the warm current. The sunlight itself seemed slower here, softened by water and salt air into something gentle against the skin. The cove remained quiet beneath the lowering sun. Near the dock ladder, one floating cushion drifted slowly against the wooden posts, rising and sinking softly with each small movement of the water. Its woven fabric had faded slightly from long summers in the sun and carried the faint, clean scent of salt and cotton warmed through by daylight. Nearby, water lapped steadily against smooth stones darkened by years of tide and weather. The air remained warm even as evening drew closer across the sea. Along the far side of the cove, sunlight rested low upon a line of pale rock, where heat gathered deeply within the stone after the long afternoon. Tiny drops of water shimmered there whenever gentle waves reached upward against the shore before sliding quietly back into the cove. Palm shadows stretched farther now across the sand and dock planks, though the warmth of the day still lingered within every surface touched by sun, quiet and warm. The hammock beneath the palms moved only slightly now, a slow, swaying rhythm that matched the rise and fall of water beneath the dock nearby. Fronds overhead gave soft brushing sounds whenever the breeze returned through the cove, though even the wind had begun easing with the coming evening. The floating cushion beside the ladder drifted lazily through the sunlit water, while reflections from the sea trembled softly beneath the dock beams. The whole cove had begun settling deeper into stillness. One smooth shell rested half beneath the shallow water near the shoreline, pale cream beneath wavering gold reflections from the lowering sun above. Warm tide water crossed over it slowly, again and again, each passing movement soft enough to barely disturb the sand surrounding the shell itself. The seagrass farther out bent gently beneath the same current. Beyond the cove entrance, the larger ocean had grown quieter now beneath the fading afternoon light. Warmth lingered deeply within the dock planks and sunlit stones, while the cove water carried the last long hours of heat close beneath the calm surface. The floating cushion beside the ladder drifted more slowly now, as the tide eased toward evening stillness, and the hammock beneath the palms rested almost motionless against the warm sea breeze. Sunlight lay lower across the water than before, turning gold softer and dimmer against the cove walls. The evening deepened gently around the shore. The water itself had begun to feel heavier now, not cold, only slower beneath the fading warmth of the day. Small ripples moved through the cove in long, quiet folds that reached the dock posts and returned softly again toward the open sea. Palm shadows stretched across the floating cushion and shallow sand below, while the scent of salt water lingered low within the warm air, and the cove was quiet, quiet and slow, slow and warm beneath the lowering sun. The hammock gave one small sway beneath the palms before settling again into stillness, its woven fabric holding traces of warmth gathered through the afternoon. Nearby, sunlight flickered softly across the waterline beneath the dock, where reflections from waves and wood beams moved lazily together through the cove. The floating cushion drifted near the ladder, without purpose or hurry. Nothing within the sheltered inlet seemed awake, except the slow, breathing motion of the sea itself. The last strong light had faded now from the tops of the rocks surrounding the cove, though warmth still rested deep within the pale stone and wooden docks beside the water. The surface of the inlet no longer flashed brightly beneath the sun, but glowed softly instead, blue and gold, folding quietly together beneath the evening sky. Palm fronds moved gently overhead, while the sea beyond the cove entrance stretched calm and darkening toward the horizon. The night continued, warm and low above the tide. The floating cushion rested lightly upon the water near the dock posts, while slow ripples moved beneath it in soft, widening circles. Heat lingered within the dock planks and shoreline stones, long after the sun had lowered toward evening. The hammock beneath the palms remained still, beside the sea breeze and drifting salt air. Nothing changed quickly here. Warm tide water crossed the shallow sand in gentle folds beneath the fading gold light, reaching the pale shell near the shoreline before slipping softly back again into the cove. Palm shadows rested across the floating cushion and dock ladder, while the sea beyond the inlet had grown smooth and dark beneath the evening sky. The whole cove drifted quietly within warmth and water, slow and deep. The hammock held its warmth beneath the leaning palms, while soft ripples moved steadily through the sheltered inlet below. The floating cushion drifted near the dock posts and smooth shoreline stones. Salt air lingered gently through the warm evening. Quiet filled the cove. The water had grown darker now beneath the fading sky, though the surface still carried traces of soft gold where evening light remained along the horizon. The dock planks held their stored warmth, while the palms moved only faintly against the quiet sea breeze. Small waves brushed steadily against the cove walls and driftwood shore. Nothing more remained to happen here. Warm water rested softly within the sheltered cove, beside sun-warmed stone and pale docks. Palm fronds moved gently above the hammock and drifting tide below. The floating cushion remained quiet beneath the fading gold sky. The evening held its warmth close beside the sea. The cove stayed warm beneath slow tide and soft gold light. The Narrowboat at Dusk. Water touched softly against the sides of the narrowboat as evening settled across the quiet canal, sending slow ripples outward beneath rows of willow trees leaning over the darkening water. Along the roof of the boat, flower pots rested beside neatly coiled rope and a small brass lantern whose amber glow reflected gently against the black-painted wood below. The last pale light of late summer lingered low beyond the canal banks, turning the still water soft blue beneath the branches overhead. Somewhere farther down the towpath, a wooden gate gave one quiet creak before the world settled again into silence. The canal remained calm beneath the fading sky. Inside the narrowboat cabin, warm light from hanging lamps rested softly upon polished wood walls and shelves lined with ceramic cups and folded blankets. A kettle sat near the small iron stove, whose low fire breathed steady warmth through the room, while the faint scent of black tea and cedar smoke drifted upward into the close evening air. Curtains had already been drawn halfway across the windows, nearest the water, though small reflections from the canal still moved quietly against the glass. Outside, the boat rocked only slightly beneath the willow branches. The evening deepened gently around the canal. One rope, tied loosely near the bow, gave a soft, brushing sound whenever the boat shifted against the slow current beneath it. The fibers had darkened with years beside water and weather, though warmth from the day still lingered faintly within the thick, woven strands. Nearby, tiny rings spread quietly outward where insects touched the canal surface beneath the willow leaves overhead. The lantern upon the roof glowed steadily through the dimming light, while the water carried reflections slowly beneath the hull. Near the stove, a wool blanket rested, folded across the built-in bench beneath the windows, its deep green threads warmed through by the fire and evening air within the cabin. The fabric carried the faint scent of cedar smoke and dried lavender, tucked long ago into the nearby cupboard shelves. Beside it, a ceramic cup held the last traces of tea warmth within pale cream-colored clay. The room remained still beneath the glow of brass lamps and stove light. Outside, willow branches brushed lightly against one another whenever the canal breeze moved gently through the trees above the boat. Their long green leaves trailed softly near the water surface and caught the last fading light in dim silver-green reflections beneath the evening sky. Along the towpath, tall grass bent quietly beside weathered stones, worn smooth by years of rain and slow footsteps. The narrowboat drifted almost imperceptibly against its ropes, quiet and warm. A small shelf above the stove held glass jars filled with tea leaves, whose soft, earthy scent deepened whenever warmth from the iron firebox reached the wood around them. Nearby, copper pans hanging along the wall reflected the lamp glow in soft amber circles that shifted gently with the movement of water beneath the boat. The cabin had already gathered the close warmth carried only by small rooms beside slow water at the end of the day. Outside, the canal moved quietly beneath the willows. Near the stern windows, one curtain edge stirred faintly whenever cooler air slipped inward through the cracked frame above the canal water below. The breeze carried the scent of damp grass and evening water, touched softly by late summer warmth still lingering along the banks. Inside, the stove gave one low settling sound as cedar logs folded inward beneath the iron grate. The brass lamps glowed lower now than before. The night had begun gathering around the canal. Warmth rested deeply within the narrow boat cabin, while the stove fire settled slowly into orange folds beneath dark cedar wood. Reflections from the canal drifted quietly across the windows and polished wood walls, blue-gray water blending softly with amber lamp glow through the dim room. The folded blanket beside the bench held its warmth close, while the ceramic cup near the stove cooled gradually beside the fire. Outside, willow leaves moved lazily against the darkening sky. The canal itself had grown slower now, beneath the deepening evening, its surface no longer carrying bright reflections from the sky, but softer shapes of trees, lantern light, and low drifting clouds above the water. The narrowboat rocked gently against the ropes, securing it beside the towpath, while the stove continued breathing warmth through the small cabin room. And the night was quiet, quiet and deep, deep and warm beside the canal. One low wave reached softly beneath the hull and passed quietly onward into darkness farther along the waterway. The lantern upon the roof cast dim gold light across the flower pots resting near the coiled rope, while shadows from willow branches drifted slowly across the narrowboat windows below. Inside, the folded blanket had begun slipping slightly against the bench beneath its own weight, toward the floorboards. Nothing in the canal world seemed hurried now. The cedar logs within the stove had burned inward to their oldest stage, where flame no longer rose brightly, but glowed low through ash and orange coals beneath the iron grate. Heat spread gently through the cabin walls and along the narrow floorboards, while the brass lamps rested soft against shelves and curtains nearby. The canal beyond the windows stretched dark and still beneath leaning willow trees and the fading summer sky. The night continued, low and steady beside the water. Warm reflections drifted across the canal windows, while the stove fire settled quietly beneath the iron door. The folded blanket rested near the bench, beside the ceramic cup and polished wood walls. Outside, willow branches moved slowly over the dark canal water. Nothing changed quickly here. The narrowboat rocked softly against the ropes, holding it beside the towpath stones, while lantern light rested low across flower pots and damp wood above the cabin roof. Inside, warmth lingered within the stove, blanket folds and cedar-scented air drifting gently through the room. The canal remained quiet beneath the trees, slow and warm. The brass lamps glowed dimly beside curtains and polished shelves, while the stove continued its soft, deep warmth through the narrowboat cabin. Water moved steadily beneath the hull and through the dark canal beyond the windows. Willow leaves brushed softly against the evening breeze. Quiet filled the towpath and water alike. The folded blanket had settled fully now against the bench and floorboards, where warmth gathered deeply near the stove. The ceramic cup remained beside the iron firebox, beneath dim lamp glow and drifting canal reflections. Outside, the lantern upon the roof continued burning softly beneath the willow branches. Nothing more remained to happen here. Warm coals glowed low within the narrowboat stove, beside folded wool and polished wood walls. Canal water moved softly beneath willow shadows and lantern light along the towpath stones. The brass lamps held their glow gently through the quiet summer night. The canal stayed warm beneath slow water and dim amber light. That was tonight's visit to the Restful Night Library. If this story helped you relax, follow the podcast for more quiet nights and gentle sleep stories. You can also find Mira Heart's books on Amazon. Listen to the full audiobook catalog on an 11 reader. Subscribe to Night Rest Studio Calm on YouTube for the video versions. Until next time, rest well.